Okay, let's get started. It's 5 p.m. I like to be prompt, and so thank you everybody for coming in. And today we're gonna have a meetup, online meetup. Um, we have let's go to agenda really quick, and then we're going to start. Let me check if we are. Yes, we do recording. Okay. So here's agenda. That's what we're gonna do. We have two topics presented by Jamie Moore from Mobile Labs, and he will present us about mobile testing in today's environment, and I think it's a very interesting topic. And Boris Gurtovoy, here we will do a little bit practicing for coding interview. I think it's always relevant, I would say, right? And obviously we're gonna have Ask a Manager, and today we're gonna have two managers, Igor from Tinder and Nicci from GreatCall. We decided to combine and do mutual session. It should be fun. And in the end, so we're gonna do networking session, the value of the all meetups and what I'm seeing from previous meetups, people like to do networking. Unfortunately, online it's going to be harder, and we have to a little bit help to each other. I posted in the Slack channel. Invite for our Slack channel in our chat. So copy paste this, or you also can find in Meetup. In the Meetup page, Slack, the link to the Slack. So get in there, and in the end, we're gonna talk, we share, and especially like for people who is hiring and for people who is looking for, that's a right time to chat with each other. And we are not promising anything, but who knows, it's always nice to have. All right, let's get started. Really quick about our partners, Test Pro. It's a bootcamp for QA. If you are guys interested in QA manual or QA automation, please check them out, testpro.io. And Jamie, I'm giving you a right to present. Let me stop sharing the screen. And you are muted. You are muted, Jamie.
There we go. All right.
Welcome.
Let's see.
Welcome.
Well, yeah. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Jamie Moore with Mobile Labs. Special thanks to Evgeny and the QA Meetup team for inviting us here. We're very excited to participate. It was supposed to be in person. We were supposed to bring food and drink, but next time. All right. So let me go ahead and we'll get into my topic. It's about mobile testing in today's environment, kind of what you need to know. So I know there's a number of you on the session. So for those of you who are more advanced in your mobile testing environment, this might be an affirmation of what you're doing. For those who are still exploring and looking at mobile testing, hopefully you'll get some good ideas and thoughts out of this. For me personally, I've been in the software testing industry for a long time. Go back to the Mercury Interactive days. So I only bring that up to say that the technology that has changed so much in software, but some of the things for the QA teams has not. I find that kind of interesting that we still don't have enough time to test. It's still a struggle to find the right tools and the right platforms to test. I still think in a lot of instances the QA teams are overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. So those things have been pretty constant throughout the year. So here's our agenda for what we're going to cover. I'm not going to read all of this because we're going to go over it. So it's just a few topics that we'll go, and we'll talk about things. So what I would normally do pre-coronavirus would be talk about the mobile testing challenges such as this. It's device management. How do you get devices? How do you track them? How do you manage where they are? How do you get them to disperse teams, to test on a mobile device or simulator, emulator, whatever? And then how do you incorporate that into your DevOps, right? That's always been a big challenge. And then if you don't do it correctly, one of the nice things about mobile is it gives the end user the most powerful voice that they've ever had. If you think back to pre-web days, right? The only way to complain was to send a letter. Then when the web came up, maybe you could go on a forum or send an email, and that's all passive. But now with mobile, you can comment on people's applications, and if you go to the Play Store or the App Store, I don't know about you, but I don't look at anything that has less than 4 stars. So, the user has a bigger voice, much bigger voice now than they ever have had. But now we have coronavirus. So how does that impact us? So pre-coronavirus, you could be at the office, your QA team, you're testing, you're talking, you can interact, and you can be a team. And now it's this. It's us, right? It's us tonight, right? We were supposed to be in person. We were supposed to be like that previous slide. We're all there together, having some food, having some drink, and now we're all virtually at home, connecting over technology. So that's presents some challenges in and of itself. So let's go over that more specifically as a tester, right? If I need to do some mobile testing, first off, I need a test environment, right? This has always been a struggle for QA folks. How do I get the right environment to test on? And then if you're using, like most folks are using Agile, how frequently are you doing your sprints? What are the number of points? How many tests I need to get done? All this stuff needs to go on, and then the automation stuff. And we'll get into all these different topics as we go, just kind of talk about that. But the very first thing that you need to worry about is up at the top for mobile is it's the first big question. And that is, you got to decide on your test environment. Again, QA, it's always your test environment. So you got 2 choices, real devices or simulators and emulators. Right, that's pretty much it. And we from Mobile Labs would say that you need to test on real devices. We're not the only ones. Apple and Google, you can go to their website. This is direct quotes from them. Just validates that you got to test on a real device just because simulators and emulators are not real devices. They don't act the same. There have been countless instances where people tested on an emulator, put their stuff out, and it crashed because the hardware, the operating system is different on hardware on a device than it is in the simulator and emulator. And if that's not good enough for you, there's another question you need to ask yourself about what you want to test on. Now, I would think every last one of you out there would say the answer to this question is a big fat 0. I don't think any of your end users are using a emulator or simulator for your application. Therefore, as a QA person, what I want to do is I got to have a production level environment to test on. And for us in mobile, that's got to be a real device. So next question is, okay, I'm working at home, right? I have my one device. How do I do all my testing that I need to do, right? So that's the big question there. And then I'm here, how do I get my application that I want to put onto my device to test? Well, there's really only way there's only one way to solve this challenge, and that is you got to use a device cloud, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So what is a device cloud? So device cloud is a way to take these mobile devices, put them in a central place, a central location, so that they can be accessible, they can be charged or online, you can access them, you do your testing, you can build and deploy apps to them, you can do your manual testing, your automated testing. So it's a place where I can get to them from my home, right? And in today's environment, you got to be able to access it from your home. And so you got to use a device cloud, and there are a couple different kinds of device clouds. I'll put it this way. So there's, you see on the left, there's a hosted, and then on the right, there's a on-premise cloud. So let's talk about the hosted first. That would be, for example, like Amazon Device Farm, Sauce Labs, we Mobile Labs, we have a hosted environment. So within those hosted environments, there's two types. Think of all these devices that are up there that you can utilize. They're the public. What I mean by a public hosted device cloud means that when you get onto a device and you do your testing and then you're done, that device goes back into the public pool so that anybody else could use it. Maybe Enrico, is lined up and queued up to use that device right after me. And then after him, somebody else can use it. So it's just, as it says, it's a public device that anybody can get a hold of and use whenever they want to. You can also set them up to where it's a private device so that only you or your organization has access to those devices. So that, again, there are some considerations there. It just depends on how security conscious you are. Some folks, with their applications before they go into production, right? These are all test versions, so they're not in production. They're very conscious about who can have access to that. So those are just some things in a hosted cloud that you need to worry about. If you do an on-premise cloud, like what's on the right, what that is it actually comes on site. It goes onto your network. All the devices are in that cabinet that you would then access. But it, again, is behind your firewall on your network so that nobody else outside of your organization can have access to anything that you're doing within your testing efforts or mobile testing efforts. So those are the two types of clouds that you need to think about. But you got to have something, right? So you got to pick one, have one. They all have their strengths. They all have capabilities that are worth looking at. But there's considerations to take in all of that. So get a device cloud, I guess is the best way to put that. So once you have a device cloud, let's put on our manual tester hat. So now, rather than just having my one device, I can have access to 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever many devices I need to get a hold of to do my testing, right? So that's what a device cloud will provide to you. And again, from home, we all have Wi-Fi, right? So that's how you get on through a browser. It's just on a browser on your computer. You get access to these devices and do your testing. So the next thing is, okay, I have access to a device. How do I get the application, right? So now that, we're all remote, I'm sitting in Atlanta, you guys are out in California, some people all over the country that are on this session. If we were all on a test team, how would we know? And where do we get it from? Some people are using Hotkey app, Test Flight. If you're doing mobile web, obviously you don't have to install an application at all. But how do you know when it's ready? Do you do Zoom calls like this or whatever? And then on the other side, look over to the right is, this is one consideration you need to take into consideration, or one point, I guess, into consideration is if your app is not the production level, right? This is not your App Store or your Play Store version, right? Is it accessing your test environments on the back end, right? So that aren't your production system. So how would you get access to those? So that's something you need to take into consideration. So as you look at your device cloud that you want to select, make sure you get one that has everything you need. Easy access to a variety of devices. Response time on the device interaction is important. Just say, some device clouds are different, more responsive than others. So, test them out, check them out, see which one has the best interaction. Make sure you have easy access to your applications that you want to work with. And then, again, you want to make sure they can get to your back-end systems. All right, so from a manual testing perspective, that's how you would do it. Obviously, the important thing there is to know what your test case is. That's the secret. That's something outside of what we're talking about here. Obviously, you need access to your test management system, whatever you're doing there. Track your manual tests, your steps, pass or fail, and whatnot. So the next thing you wouldn't want to do is we want to talk about automation. And this is obviously a bigger challenge, particularly when you're now at home, work from home, on how you want to do this. So there's a number of factors here with mobile automation tools. And we'll talk about that. What I would recommend is you look at the open source commercial tools and the tool architecture. In real life, you would do that in parallel. Since I'm just doing this in a PowerPoint presentation, I've got to go one after the other. So We'll talk about the tools first. We'll talk about their architecture later after that, but they do have some impact, together. You need to take that into consideration as you look at the appropriate tool for you and your team as far as what you want to use. Obviously, skill sets are a big factor on who's going to be using the tools as well. So let's look at that. But here's before we get into the actual tools themselves, let's talk about why we actually need mobile test automation. I mean, everybody knows we need to automate applications, right? But for mobile, it's a major impact, and you get a lot of automation gains because this is from Bugfender. They do a survey constantly, 24 hours every day. They kind of go over the distribution of iOS versions that are out there in the market and the iOS devices. So if you look at this, they just have the main numbers, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? But there are, as you know, there are point versions of all those operating systems, right? So there's a bunch of operating systems that need to be considered, as well as, if you look at that, there's 16 popular iOS devices, right? So that's a challenge in of itself. But if you look at the Android side of the house, right, Android doesn't make you upgrade your OS as adamantly as Apple does. So there's 20 of those iOS or Android operating system versions out there. You can't even count the number of Android devices. I mean, they're in the thousands, tens of thousands that are out there, the different ones. So there's a big, so back up. Mobile web testing, right? If I'm going to do mobile web testing, I got Chrome, IE, Firefox, Safari, different versions of them, so it is relatively manageable as far as the permutations. But when I get into real device testing with the different OS versions and the different devices, let's put some numbers on this. Let's say I want to do login, right? Basic login, username, password, hit sign in, did it pass, right? So if you look at this from an iOS perspective, let's just take 10 different OS versions. I got 16 different device types. That's 160 unique test cases to run on that. Go over to Android, it gets even crazier. So if I take all of those, that's 20. Just take the top 30 devices, that's a bunch of test cases. That's 760 tests I got to run just for login. I mean, that's not even, do I create an account? How do I check my balance? How to do any of that sort of stuff? Even if you take, all right, I'll give you this. We're not going to do all those little Android versions that just have little small slices. Just take 10. Right, so now that's still 300. That's still 400 tests that you got to run. So you got to come up with an automation strategy that allows you to run all these different tests against all these different devices. I would probably say, from a realistic perspective, look at your end user population. It's probably going to be the 80-20 rule. 80% of your population is using 20% of some combination of those. So focus on that is really what you want to automate. But just to hammer home, you got to automate, and then so you got to find the right automation tool to fit your environment, and there are a lot of choices, right? So obviously Appium is a big popular one, Xcode with XUI test, Android Studio with Espresso. You got all the commercial products like Tricentis, Catalan, Micro Focus. Some of these are free, some of these are not free. So again, they all work in different ways. And one of the things you got to take into consideration with test automation, is the same, always has been, is how do you identify the object? I mean, this has been something that we've worried about way back in the client server days, through the web days, and now in mobile. There's a few ways you can do OCR. You can instrument the application so you can grab a hold of the object and grab the properties of it, or you can use the native operating system API, so you can get the properties of the object that way. So all those different tools we just looked at, use one of these three, right? So for example, Eggplant, they have a very sophisticated OCR engine that allows you to map out the different objects based on their image. The nice thing about this is it is platform independent. So if you're using like the same icon on iOS, on Android, on anything else, it goes across the different platforms. You don't have to really worry about the object so much. So that's their philosophy. An instrumented app, this is For example, this is UFT or for Micro Focus, used to be HP, UFT, you know, whatever. So it instruments the application, so now you get to see a lot of the lower level attributes along with it. Along with object name, you get the font, you get all that sort of stuff. And then with, I mean, this is Appium Desktop. For those of you who've used Appium, you'd recognize this. You get the object name, you get the XPath, you get the identifier. So the thing about testing in mobile, which is different than web, is if you look at this object name, it's very platform specific. It's Android specific. You know, when you're doing web testing, the object name in web is probably the same if you're on Chrome or IE or Firefox. So, you know, it's easier to go cross browser in mobile, Android versus iOS. And here's, for example, Catalan. When you build your script, there are different ways to build it, but this is on an iOS. You can see that the identifier is different, right? So that presents some challenges in and of itself. But so you use these tools to build your script. There's different ways of doing it. Some of them allow you to record. You bring up the application on your device. You go through the steps. It captures the object, captures what you did, captures what you entered it, just like you used to do with your other tools that you recorded with in the web testing. So they allow you to do that. Other tools, again, if I'm writing Appium, if I'm writing a test ng, maybe I'm just writing it, you know, right from, you know, scratch. So I'm doing it manually. And again, this is an example of how I can, within an Appium script, write it so it can work on both iOS and Android just by specifying the different object identifiers for both. I mean, incorporate that. Just kind of get past that platform difference that I was talking about. Again, things you just need to kind of think about. This is one from Tricentis. This is Tosca. So what it'll do is it'll scan your application, grab the objects. If anybody's used UFT, this is similar to the object repository where you grab it and then you can specify what objects you want to use in your script. So it's something you put in there, put in your script flow to build your test script. So those are pretty much the different ways to build the steps. And then obviously the main thing about a test script is did it pass or fail? I mean, that's what testing is all about, right? Yeah, we don't build scripts to like go through it just for the just for grins, right? So it's always, I did this, I stopped, what did I get, right? And is it what I expected? What is my actual versus my expected? And are they the same? And if they're not the same, what do I do? So each of those tools has different ways of doing that. You either put it in yourself, you can use the drop-down, you know, so there's different, again, as you look at the different automation tools out there, look at how they allow you to do the verification process, because obviously that's the most important thing in your script is you got to validate, did my application do what I expected it to do? Because if it didn't, then that's what you want to know about, right? And then if it didn't, then what kind of reporting do you get out of it? And then this is, again, just a sample of different tools that you know, do different reports. So it's just, not that we'll go through what those are, but you know, as you look at your test tool that you're checking and evaluating, make sure that the reporting that you get out of it is what you need, that it feeds your test management system or however you set up your reporting stuff. So that's something to consider there on your test reporting. So look at those capabilities for what you're doing. And then the other thing with mobile, right? So performance testing in web is pretty much, hey, I hit search, let's say, how long did it take to search, go to the back end and come back with my results? So it's a round trip. That's still important in mobile. The other thing that's important in mobile is, if you look over on the left, what's happening on the device itself, right? So this is another part of performance testing that mobile brings in that we really didn't have to worry about so much in web, because that's, you know, the web actually on the computer itself didn't have that much of an impact on the performance. But if I'm on a device that has its memory all chewed up, or if my app is chewing up the CPU, or you know, all these types of things I need to consider, you know, that have an impact on how my application performs, and I need to know those things. So you need to be able to capture those types of metrics along with how long did it take to search for a result? You know, how long was my round trip? And then, this other one is just an example of the number of requests, the data going back. So it's just things to consider with mobile that you need to take into consideration, particularly now that, since everybody's probably working from home, everybody's on their device, everybody's using this to do their lookups, to do their ordering, to do all their work. So it's important to make sure you test for all the different aspects that people are going through in your application. And then here's another big one. What do I do if I need help? If you're doing an open source tool like an Appium, then Google and the forums are your best friend, maybe Stack Overflow. You hope that somebody else has had your issue before. You can go search and look for that. So open source tools are like that. Good luck. Try and find the community you work with. If you get in a commercial product, obviously you can call up their support center and get a hold of somebody to talk to online, open up a support ticket and work through the ticket on your issue and resolve that and go. All right, so that's the kind of the different tools in and of themselves. Again, they all have different capabilities. They all fit different needs and requirements. So look at all of them, make sure that they fit your team. And then the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is what's the architecture? So there's three main types of architectures for these tools. There's either tethered, client server, or cloud-based. All right, so let's talk about that. First one is tethered. This is what most everyone is used to. I need to have a device. I need to connect it directly to my computer, like Xcode, Android Studio. Most of these tools want you to plug it in direct with a USB. So that's a tether. The client server model is the other one. So this is what Appium does. And it's a nice architecture. So it allows you to, your computer in and of itself doesn't have to have the device connected to it directly. So your script talks to a server, and then the devices are connected to the server. As you can see here, particularly for Appium, if you're going to do any iOS testing, the Appium server has to be on an iOS. The nice thing about Appium is it does allow you to use pretty much any front-end language that you want. I put in Catalan and Tricentis here. This is Tosca, and they're not the only ones, but some of the test tools themselves will point to an Appium server. So they don't bring it themselves. You can set it up yourself, but you can also access a different Appium server. So they leverage Appium servers, so they're kind of a client server model. But again, you got to have devices connected to your Appium server. And then the last one is, well, here's another example. Eggplant. They don't have it's sort of like the Appium server, except for them, they call it a gateway. So again, your test script can be remote from the gateways. You can connect to it over the network, but your devices will be connected to the gateway directly. Same thing with Micro Focus with their soap test. That's how they work, and that's for iOS only. And then what's new now is what's called cloud-based testing. So these tools are actually up in the cloud. Everything sits up there. You would write your script, it sits on the server, but the devices are connected to the test server itself over USB. So that the common theme here is every slide of those had a USB connection to a device. So again, we've been here before. The only way to solve this, particularly if you're working from home and you're using a tool that needs a tethered device that you don't have, is it's got to be on a device cloud. I mean, so guess we can't emphasize that too much for tonight. As far as the way we're in now, you got to have a device cloud so you can access these devices remotely. And then these are, now that we have to go through all this, but with a device cloud now, I can access and run my scripts on remote devices. I don't have to have them actually tethered or plugged in. This is Appium. This is, we've seen Catalan and Tosca. This is for Eggplant, Micro Focus. So it's all the same thing. These are the cloud-based guys. So everything is based on their cloud. So it sits up there, runs up there. You don't have to put anything on your inbox. So those are just different ways of doing it to run your different applications. So again, you got to get a test cloud, device cloud for your automation. So just to kind of summarize all that up, evaluate all the different automation tools that are out there. They all have capabilities that you need to look at, determine what's best for you and your team. Some are more, you gotta be more technology savvy in that you gotta be able to write scripts, to program. Some are easier, you can be not as technical. So look at those. But then you gotta support a device cloud that supports your tool of choice. Pick one that'll support multiple. Not everybody, wants to do the same kind of test tool. So get a device cloud that would support a broad range of tools for your end users. So we kind of talked about testing a lot, but testers are not the only ones that need access to devices, right? So you got other teams that need access to devices, development and your CI teams. So same kind of thing. They need access to a device cloud. So with, for example, like Xcode, if you're doing XUI test, or Android Studio with Espresso, or just to build an app, deploy to an app, do your debugging, even before you promote it as a developer, you need access to these devices. So get a device cloud that has the capability of doing a virtual USB, if you will. Like for us, we call it Device Bridge. Like Sauce Labs, they would call it Sauce Connect. So, different clouds has these capabilities where it is virtually a USB connection to a device, allows you to get up there. And then from a developer's perspective, if I'm working with it, I would have the device up in a viewer. So it kind of looks like a simulator, kind of looks like an emulator, but really it's a real device. So this allows your developer to do his testing, do his debugging on a real device to get those real responses from what a device would provide to them. And then the goal there is the code that they check in is higher quality because they've been testing on a real device versus a simulator or an emulator. So that's the nice thing there. And the other thing, if you notice, is you can connect to more devices than you have USB ports. So if I was a developer at home and I've got just a few USB ports, I could only connect to a couple of devices at a time. If I can do it over a device cloud, now I have a choice of selecting these different devices as I need to, as I want to. So I have multiple devices to deploy and debug on, more than I have USB ports. So that's a convenience that having it in a device cloud provides to your developers. So that's pretty much for the developer standpoint. And then once they build it, let's talk about continuous delivery for mobile. Anybody who's played Mousetrap before, the way you build it is one piece at a time. Once you get it all done, the reason why I have this up here as an image for continuous integration, continuous delivery is, if you've ever played it, as you start that crank, that yellow and red crank that makes that green boot kick the yellow bucket. So if that doesn't work right, nothing else works. So that's the way Mousetrap was. If you didn't have everything lined up just right, it would fail at that step. Continuous delivery for software, mobile particularly, is the same way. If you don't have everything lined up, if you don't have your build process done correctly, nothing else will work. If you don't have your application check in, upload, deploy, nothing else works. But the biggest thing for a continuous delivery for mobile is picking the right tool. And right there, the third one is the automation test scripts, obviously access to devices. So if you don't have a comprehensive suite of automated tests for your continuous delivery, then that's something you need to target and work for, because this is like your last line of defense. When you put that application out there, you want to run it through the gauntlet. If it's all in automated fashion, run it through all the different tests. So this is a continuous delivery for web. So for web, it was easy when they started with the virtual machines, right? That really made life a lot easier for QA folks. We didn't have to go and beg the IT group to build us out a server. So it was easy to set up some servers, create some systems, put the web app out there, whatever I need to do my testing, right? And then you would kick off your test, automated test on your web browser and whatnot, and then that would kick it off. But for mobile, again, if I'm going to test and run my test on real devices, how does my CI tool get access to them? It's got to be in a device cloud, right? So it has to know where it is. through a device cloud. And once you've done that, then you can, again, after you, depending on how you set up your process, right? You build, or you check in your code, you build your code, deploy your code to the app, run your test on your app, and then you get your results just like everything else, right? So then you get the benefit of the whole DevOps model. You can incorporate it for your web testing. So now you're doing your whole cross-platform, your mobile web, or your mobile testing, your web testing. This is just an example of how you could upload into a device cloud. Most of the device clouds have just an API call. So once you've built it and generated your APK or your IBA, you would just use a REST API or some sort of API call to upload it, and then you kick off your test however you have it set up. So it's an easy way to do that to get your testing and get everything done. All right, so those are just things to consider for us, Mobile Labs. Whoops, sorry. Just a couple of things. We were founded in 2001. Our primary thing is an on-premise device cloud. We do have a hosted device cloud. It is private only, but that's what we provide. We work with all those different test tools that you just saw. All those screenshots were taken against our device cloud. So for us, we're tool agnostic. You can use any or all. Doesn't really matter to us. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you tonight. Again, main thing from working at home in this new environment is having access to a device cloud so that you can do both your manual and automated testing. If you want some more information, or we can have I know we have a broad range of audience out here, different experiences, different current situations. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about your specific one. Feel free to contact me, contact the info email address, scan the QR code, etc. We'd be happy to chat with you and see if there's anything we can do to help you out.
Hey, Jamie, we have questions here.
Okay.
Yeah, one question. And guys, if you have a question, you can raise the hand like Andy Ross did. And if we will have time, I'll give you your ability to answer this question. Ask a question. So the first one will be, does Mobile Labs support other test frameworks like Espresso and Calabash?
Yes. Yeah, we do. Like I was saying, we don't really care. Like those specific frameworks need a tethered device. So for us, that would be a virtual USB cord connection. We call it device bridge. So yes, we support those frameworks very easily.
Okay. The other question in the Q&A section, all tests you showed, you actually run them on a device, not an emulator?
Correct.
And,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all everything I
right?
showed. Yes, everything I showed in the slide deck that you saw was on a real device.
Okay. Another one, how to build local device cloud other than STF for Android.
I'm sorry,
Do you see the question like in the Q&A section?
How do you build a local device cloud other than STF for Android?
Use Mobile Labs. Yes.
And someone wanted to ask, can you expand on the concept of slave master terminology? That was new to some folks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that was, that's just in the, sure, let me scroll down to that. That's in the continuous delivery mode. That's just talking about when you're running a job like from Jenkins, the Jenkins is the master, it's the controller. So it's talking to different machines out there. So on each of those remote machines that are driving an action, that's called a slave. So that's just a component of your CI tool that's running steps on an actual, like a build server or a test server or something like that.
And Seth has a question concerning, it looks like connectivity, and does the device cloud include capabilities for running the servers that the mobile devices are talking to, especially when mobile devices must be within the same LAN and domain as the server?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on the device cloud and where it is. So if it's on premise, then it's easy because the devices would either, you could connect to your own internal Wi-Fi, which would then have access to those internal systems. So that's pretty easy. If it's on a hosted environment and it has to go into, again, a system that's not publicly available, then you would need to set up like a site-to-site VPN connection. So for those device clouds, you have to make sure that they support that kind of connection. Not all of them do. We do, but so that's again something you need to consider. That's another benefit of having an on-premise device cloud.
Yeah, I can answer that a little more specifically, Seth. As a user of the mobile labs, we're actually, our controllers on the mobile cart are directly connected to our internal networks, so the devices can talk to them, as well as the mobile devices also connect to a wireless SSID that is also accessible to our non-production environments. That's how we connect it. But as we move the mobile cart to the cloud, we would need a site-to-site VPN for that one. So hopefully that helps you on how this thing connects to your networks.
Okay, let's have a couple more questions before we move forward. Actually, there is another question like, dealing with scripts like Appium is challenging at best. Any way we can manually record and playback scenarios on cloud, no code automation. So basically, can you record and playback? That's, I think, was the question from Usman.
From a manual testing perspective or automation?
Manual. Yeah, for manual.
For manual, well, that depends on some of the clouds. Right now, we're mobile labs specifically. We're incorporating that. There are some clouds that allow you to do that.
Another question was about how do you go using cloud device with hybrid apps like app with mobile web view?
Well, the device cloud, like for us specifically, it doesn't matter to us. That would be, again, probably more on the automation framework that you're using to make sure it supports both of them. Obviously Appium does. You can switch views back and forth. So, that would be an automation framework. From a manual testing perspective, I'm speaking for mobile labs, it doesn't matter. You can have native, hybrid, or mobile web. We support all of that.
All right, let me unmute Andy Ross. Andy, you go ahead. You can ask a question. No? Yes? Okay, let me give Anthony back. Anthony, you can ask a question with.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So for an automated test running against mobile labs, I know that it's sometimes useful to have the test running, and when it errors, to capture a picture or to have video. Is there any, do you have any sort of hooks into that so that when we run it, it can be sort of independent, and then we can come back and look and see what the error was, whether via a screenshot or video?
So, if you're running this in an automation perspective, the automation framework should capture that while you're doing it. I know like Appium has, video capabilities. You can always, as part of your test that you're building, just like anything else, right? You come to a spot where things aren't right, you take a screenshot, you take a thing of where you are. So that would be a part of the automation framework that you would put in.
Makes sense.
All right, thank you very much, Jamie. That was an awesome presentation, and let's move forward, guys. So we have Ask a Manager session. That's going to be the next one, and welcome Igor Dorovskikh, engineering manager at Tinder, and Nicci Tynen, director software quality at GreatCall. Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Where is Igor? Igor, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, cool. Okay, so let's do this way. Let's imagine that the candidate passed phone screening with recruiters and he was handed over to you. So what are you looking for in the candidate when you're doing the interview? Let's start with Igor.
So the question is for what position? For the manual tester, for the ASTAD? What exactly?
Let's do for you full automation position.
For the test automation?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Obviously, nowadays, since the whole movement of shifting left and be part of development process, we're looking for definitely engineering skills. There is a lot of, I would say, undereducated, underqualified quality assurance engineers in the market. It's flooded with them. So it's very, very hard to filter out. So what I usually do, and I think this is general practice, is basically set up the coding session. We start with very, easy algorithms for like, 30 minutes just to see if the person can code. If it is, we're hiring, let's say, for the Android team, so obviously it's supposed to be in Java or Kotlin, preferably Kotlin, but it doesn't matter. If the person can code simple stuff, then we can move on. So this way we'll filter out things. That would be the next logical step. And after that, obviously the most important aspect of the engineer, right, is to be able to perform the job. So I'm a big fan of the hands-on interviews. So I don't like this, asking questions because everybody can prepare for that. I would like to see how the person gonna work. So for that reason, at Tinder, we have a few problems already, a few apps, open source apps implemented, which we basically ask our candidates when they come to the office, right? Or if they cannot come to the office virtually in today's world, right? So we ask them to work on that problem for the 3 hours. And during that time, we bring different engineers to collaborate with that person. So we see, first of all, how much the person can complete in that 3 hours. Also, if the person gonna start just on solving the writing test or working on architecture, we see their logical, kind of thinking how the people gonna develop a software in terms of testing under time pressure, and also how they will ask right question with the engineers. So this way we're not testing that the person have to complete the entire task. We're testing how the people actually work, and that reveals their experience, that reveals their expertise, and plus we have them the entire internet open, so they can Google, they can do whatever they want to do in order to complete or get close to the completion of the task.
Thank you. Yeah. Nicci, the same question, but let's imagine the position is for manual QA. What is your expectation? What are you looking for in the candidate when you do interview?
Sure, and that really depends on the tech stack of the organization, but some general things I look for is overall a positive attitude. I want somebody who's passionate and excited about the role that they're interviewing for. I want them to be able to troubleshoot. That is a skill that I find a lot of people don't really have, but the ability to cut a problem in half and then see and just continue to do that until you identify where your failure point is. And I do look for a certain level of technical skills. I come from I've mostly worked in Unix shops, so you have to have a certain level of technical expertise. You have to understand how to parse a stack trace, how to dive into logs, how to understanding the tech stack that your software runs on so that you can go run analysis of how your systems are performing and identify if there are memory leaks. So those are the types of qualities I look for in a quality assurance candidate.
All right, does make sense. Makes sense totally. What about your favorite interview questions? Can you guys share? Like, Igor, let's start with you. Your favorite.
Oh, if we're talking about the, yeah, I try to stay in mute to make sure we have a good quality of the sound. If we're talking about soft skills, right? My favorite question is basically, give me the list of the conferences or webinars or meetups that you go into, and also name at least, you know, two, I would say, gods in our industry, right? Who are the true evangelists, especially if it is test automation world. And let's say if we talk about, let's say, Espresso, for instance, or Appium, right? We had talked about Appium quite a lot today. So who are the key people behind Appium? Who are the key contributors? Who are the drivers of this? So if the person obviously know that they are following the latest trends, they follow the meetups, they are in the loop. If people say, I don't know, that means that they are outdated in their skill set, and that means that pretty much they will have to do a lot of catch up.
Nicci, how about you? Your favorite interview question? You're muted. You're muted. Nicci, you're muted. We cannot hear you. Yep. Let me help you. I can unmute you. No, you're still muted.
Fighting my own technology.
Here we
I
go.
apologize. There we go. I apologize for that. So for critical thinking, I like to give them a type of a puzzle to solve. So lately I've been drawing a 3-button soda machine that has, you know, takes coins, and mine takes tap and pay. And I ask them to attack it and tell me all the test cases they could write. And I look for creative thinking, critical thinking, thinking beyond just I push a button and a soda comes out. One of the best answers I think I ever had to it was somebody said, I want to do a drop test. And I thought, that's fabulous. They wanted to knock it over and see what would happen if they knocked it over. So
by the way, right?
That's one of my favorites to ask. And I generally like to ask people if they like to have fun at work. We're there a long time, and sometimes there are late nights. And I like to know if this person's going to maintain an upbeat, positive attitude during all of that, be a team player, and laugh. I like to laugh while I'm at work. So I like my team members to be able to enjoy it as well.
Yeah, totally. All right, that was positive things. Let's talk about red flags. So what are red flags for you guys? Igor?
So there obviously could be a lot of red flags. Yeah, depends on the role, depends whom you're looking for. So to be honest, it's very hard to interview and to find out who is the person and how they're going to work in 1 hour. It's pretty much impossible. But definitely there's certain techniques that can reveal certain problems, such as, like I mentioned earlier, that's why I'm a big fan of hands-on. Again, for manual testing is a little bit more trickier, but for engineering positions is very straightforward. Either person can do work or cannot do the work. And the red flags usually revealed during the hands-on session when people have to talk to engineers while they perform a task under time pressure. And that's how you basically find out what what a person made of. And a great example, for instance, are they asking right questions? If let's say after 1 hour, the engineer comes to the room and asking, how can I help you? And the person says, I'm busy, sorry, I need to finish that. Bye. That means that that person is not a team player, right? If the person asking questions such as, can you help me to clarify the architecture? Let's look together the thing, let's debug together. That means that this is exactly whom we're looking for. A person who are willing to work with other people. Another, there is another great way of how they are asking right questions, right? For instance, if you are conducting the phone screen and people never ask questions about the company, and there's like, what type of frameworks are you using? What is your current architecture? What is you guys using for CI/CD? How many people you have on the team? Are you planning to expand? All this. If people just simply say, "I don't have any questions for you," that's a red flag. That means they don't care. And they obviously, another big hint for the rookies and newcomers who are entering to this industry is, before you go to interview, please spend some time to learn about company you're going to. Because at the end of the day, you will spend in that company more time than you spend with your beloved ones. So if you are willing to step forward and work for that company, you better know what they do, because you will become part of it. So please take some time, at least learn what their core business is. Usually nowadays, the whole information is public.
Totally agree. Nicci?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Igor just said. In addition, I find that when people lack detail in the answers to their questions, that's usually a red flag that their knowledge is surface knowledge, something they read about maybe once, but really haven't worked with a lot. So there's no depth. And inability to provide examples. I will ask people about, give me an example of a time in your past work history when you disagreed with an engineering leader, and how did you deal with that? And if they can't provide me an example of that, or they just talk around it, then that's usually a red flag that they haven't done it before, or they've not succeeded or gotten to a reasonable end or a collaborative end, and just generally lacking passion. And it all goes with a lot of what Igor said. If you don't read about the company and what we do, GreatCall's a prime example. I had a candidate come in and they said, "You make phones." And I'm like, not quite. Yes, we do have phones, but our main focus is the elderly and letting them live independently. And when people say that, I think, well, you're just applying for a job. You don't really care. And I want somebody who cares about and is interested in the role that they're interviewing for.
Yeah, totally agree. What about resume tips and hints? Nicci, let's start with you. Can you give some advice about resume? What are you looking for in the resume, and like which resume will stand out from the crowd? Let's do it this way.
Well, I think concise resumes stand out for me. I don't need paragraphs of explanation about what you did. I'm a big bullet point person, even though that might not be the way that resumes go. But if I can consume it quickly, then I know that you have the skill set I'm looking for and the experience I'm looking for. Whenever I get on the phone with you, I'll find out how much of that is legitimate, because my biggest advice is just don't put a skill on your resume if you can't really answer a question about it. As I said, I come from a Unix background. I used to be a system administrator, and I have had countless interviews where I've talked to people about their Linux and Unix skills, and they tell me they're experts, and their resumes say they're experts, and I drill in on one question and they fall to pieces. And that's really tough, because if you're going to put it on your resume, you have to be very prepared that somebody's going to ask you questions about it. You can't just read an article and say, I'm an expert in Java, or I'm an expert in networking. You have to have done it and be able to respond to that. And the other thing, that the advice I give, and I even give this in interviews, is when I ask a question, like a skill question, I have a series of questions that I always ask people about Linux if I work in a Linux shop. And I will say, if you don't know the answer, just tell me you don't know it, and tell me where you would go to find that answer. But instead, I've had countless interviews where I hear people typing to try to find the answer while we're on the phone, or saying it's not necessary. And if I'm asking the question, I feel that it's a relevant skill. So just tell me, I don't know, but I go to Google, or I go to Stack Overflow. There are a lot of things you can say that will show me that you have the ability to learn.
Yeah, sure. Igor, what do you say?
I'm basically gonna save time for the Boris for the next talker or speaker. I will basically, I presume that everyone who is on today's webinar are part of the Slack channels, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
if that's correct, I will share an amazing blog post that actually breaks in detail how to write effective resumes. And it will basically explain step by step what it means effective resume, which I support every word that that actually, it wasn't written by me, but I liked it a lot. It actually emphasizes my philosophy. Pretty much it talks about what just Nicci says about the resume has to be very honest. Otherwise, you will fail the interview. And usually people walking by the resume. And also the main bullet point is you have to put your achievements that are, what kind of value have you brought into the company? Like if you say that you automated regression testing, what it means, you automated like what? 20% of regression tests that saved 50% of manual testing time. This is the achievement. So, and again, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. I'm going to share with amazing blog posts with everyone. And I think that I'm going to answer pretty much my question.
Thank you. And my last question, it's not listed, but I think it's very relevant to these days. Are you guys hiring right now at this moment, or also on the freeze?
We're in a freeze right now.
And we actually do hiring, majority of engineering roles, and Tinder actually started few people recently. So yes, we are hiring. It's challenging to onboard people right now online, but yes, I've seen engineers coming on board.
Enrico, how about you guys?
Yeah, so right now we are also on freeze with regards to hiring, but we are always open for conversation because you don't want to be caught off guard as your company grows. And and it takes a while to do the interviews and the processes. So we are continuing to entertain conversations and building that networking with the different people. So I saw Yevgeny just posted the Slack channel. Please, everyone, connect over there. That's probably the easier way to have a bilateral dialogue with any of us on here. That's the best place to do it. And please continue to be active out there. We're all one small network, and the group of people in here are the candidates that we're looking at. So.
Yeah, right. So let's do networking after Boris' session, and in this Slack channel, in the networking, actually in the Slack workspace, in the networking channel, we will do some activity after that. All right.
Evgeny, I was gonna real quick. Sorry, I think we jumped in. Maybe Nicci, we didn't get a chance for you to introduce yourself and your company. Maybe if you can give 30 seconds, tell us a little bit about yourself and the company GreatCall. That would be great for people to know.
Oh yeah, sure.
Am I muted still?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So a little bit about myself. I've been in this industry for about a little over 20 years now, and I've been in quality for about the last 17 or 18 of it, building teams for last 15 or 16 of it. I really enjoy the technology of it. I'm self-taught. I started out as a teacher. GreatCall is been a very exciting opportunity. For those of you that aren't familiar with GreatCall, we're most widely known for the Jitterbug phones, which are the big button phones that the seniors use. And late last year, we got acquired by Best Buy. So we're becoming Best Buy Health. And we will be expanding our services to allow seniors to live independently. And we do that through a series of services, not just the phones, but we have personal emergency response devices. We have a 5-star service, which lets you call our 5-star agents, and then if needed, they'll call your emergency contacts or dispatch emergency services to your home. We also have, we acquired another company that has social workers as an aspect of it. So that loneliness side of being a senior, where you don't have anybody to talk to, they can just call in and talk to one of those social workers and get that human contact, which is even more important now given the social isolation and social distancing that we're doing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you very much. Let's move forward. So, how to crush your coding interview, and welcome Boris, iOS developer at Tinder. Boris, you can take over sharing the screen.
Thank you, Evgeny.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen, guys?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Great. Our next topic is very relevant to the previous topic. So engineering managers talked about how to pass interview, but in order to talk to engineering managers, you usually first need to do the coding challenge, right? Doesn't really matter what position are you targeting for, you'll be asked algorithms. And many people are frustrating and they think this is some rocket science here, but actually it's not. Today, I'll show you how to brainstorm and how to solve one problem. I've chosen this problem completely arbitrary. This is a pretty popular problem on the interviews. Many companies ask these particular problems. And we'll see different approaches how to resolve it. So let me introduce you with the problem first. I've chosen Java as a programming language, but as you probably know, you can choose whatever language is comfortable for you on the interviews. Usually you will not be required to use specific programming language. If you can solve the algorithm using any programming languages, it will be completely fine. So our problem is the font all right?
It looks fine, Boris.
Thanks, Igor. So our problem is you are given an array of integers. All elements are either ones or zeros inside the array. And your goal is to order this array in ascending order. Let's think about this problem. First of all, let's visualize what we are asked. This is very important to read problem very carefully. So we are given with an array of integers, and we know that all elements there are zeros or ones. We don't have any other integers inside, right? So let's say we have 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. Doesn't really matter, right? And you need an ascending order. Ascending order means our final array is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. Sorry, I missed 1 0, right? 4 zeros and 2 ones, 3 ones, right? That's our expected result, right? So now let me introduce with multiple steps how to find the correct path to the solution. So number one question you need to ask yourself is input. What is the input parameter? And it's really important to clarify for yourself what is the type of the input parameter. In our case, it's pretty straightforward, right? Because we are given an array of integers. Obviously, the input parameter is array of ints. And I wrote it here. I chose Java because Java is the most classic language for algorithms. But again, if you love Kotlin or Swift or Python or Pascal, doesn't really matter. All works. Great. So we know that this is array of integers, right? Now, number 2, I would recommend you to ask about the output. So you need to visualize and write down what exact output you are asked for. In our case, we just need to sort this array. So we're going to do it in place, right? We would sort the same array we're given. So we have a void function. Our function does not return anything, meaning it's void. The third question is what data structure and methods associated with it will be used. The majority of algorithms will use some data structures. It doesn't really matter. It can be straightforward data structures such as collections, or more complicated such as trees or linked lists. This particular sorting is very basic sorting, right? Because we have this small condition that all elements are either 0 or 1s, which makes our life so much easier. So we probably can do it without using any data structures, just using our array and some math. The next question is, where are we going to store the temporary data? Obviously, the less temporary data you use, the better, right? Because if you allocate the big data structure, extra data structures in your memory, it is complicated for your machine, right? Because those data structures can be huge and it will eat lots of memory. So this problem is easy enough to skip this step. Probably we will not use temporary data at all. Just 1 or 2 variables, which is not data at all. We're talking about the big collections or data structure in this step. And now it is really important to describe the model of the algorithm before implementing any solution in code. So I always recommend to draw something if you have a possibility, maybe describe something in pseudocode. Do not use Java or Swift or whatever concrete programming language. Just try to pseudocode it with pure English. Helps a lot. So let's think about this array before moving forward. We know that we always can sort any array with the help of standard function, right? We can just say array.sort and it will sort any array. But we have this condition that it has only 1 and 0s, which probably helps us that there is a more optimal solution than just pure sorting. We know that this is very heavy operation for a computer. This algorithm is not fast. Probably we need to talk a couple of words what is fast algorithm right here. So obviously it would be unfair if we compare 2 algorithms by the time, because my machine can be not as powerful as yours machine. And if I would compare with NASA machine, I will always lose, right? So time is not a good equivalent of good algorithm. People decided that the better alternative here is number of operations. How many operations your algorithm need to do in order to create a solution, in order to resolve the task. And that's the same number on any machine, right? My machine will do n operations and your machine will do n operations. And usually n is a size of input data, because as you can see, our input data has no particular size, right? It can be an array of 3 elements, or it can be an array of billion elements. And obviously, if we have billion elements, now the complexity of algorithm really comes to a game. Because if we use like not that optimal algorithm, it can take days or months in order to complete the algorithm. And the regular sorting, as for today, people did not come up with optimal way to sort any algorithms. It's hard, it's complicated task, and many mathematicians and computer scientists are trying to solve it today, but still no result. We have a way to sort, but it takes a lot of time. The complexity is hard. But we have this trick. We have only ones and zeros, which probably will help us to do some good solution here. Let's try to approach in this way. If we count the amount of, let's say, ones or zeros, it doesn't really matter. Let's pick up one. We'll count the number of ones right here. We know that we have only 3 ones. We also can easily get the size of array itself. Right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements inside. Obviously, if we know that we have 7 elements inside and 3 of them are ones, we can count how many zeros should be in the array. 7 minus 3, which is 4. That's how we can start filling up our array with zeros, because we know exactly how many zeros we should place there. And then all the rest we can fill up with ones. This is much optimal because you do only one for loop, right? Only one cycle here, and you sort the array. Regular sorting is much worse. So how to do that? Coding is very simple here, right? First of all, we need to count something, let's say ones. To do that, we can use any for loop. For example, for each works good. So I'll use for int element inside the array. And we are interested to count number of ones, let's say. So I'll create the integer temporary variable. This is not temporary data because it's not data structure. It's just one temporary variable, which is nothing for computer. So we can not count it. And it will be 0 by default. And now when I count, I'll just add my element to the count. What does it give to us? If our element is 0, count will not change, right? Because any number, any digit, any number, we are adding 0 to that number, we're still at that number, right? But if there is a 1 as an element, we will add the 1 and the count will be incremented. So at the result, count will represent exactly how many ones are in the array. Now, the next step, we need to identify how many zeros should we fill in later. So we can describe it as end of zeros, zeros index. And our end of zero index will be the length of array, which is array.length minus array.length, that's just a length, minus our count, which represents the number of ones. Now, with the next for loop, we'll just go from 0 to the end of zero index we just described. And we'll increment I 1 by 1. And we'll fill in everything with zeros right here, right? Next step, we are going to go from end of zero index where we just stopped and to the end of the array, our length, incrementing I by 1. And we know that we need to fill everything with 1. That should be it, but let's move to the 6th step, which is obviously we need to test what we wrote. So don't forget to write unit tests. And try to think about edge cases, because usually algorithms do have edge cases. So think about some edge scenarios to test your algorithm. In our case, I don't think we have much edge cases, but we will find out some of them. Let's create a sort array test. So sort array regular one. I'll just create the class we just created, right? The sort array of 0 ones, the one where we just rolled the solution. And let's create some array, test array. So I'll create it with 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. Just arbitrary numbers. And I'm interested to do sort array with this array. And just, I can assert, or as for now, I can just use assert. Yes, not this assert. Unit 1. So assert array equals. Let's create expected value. Expected value is. So we would expect 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Cool. So, and let's just assert that our array our sorted array equals to expected value. Hopefully I didn't mess up the. Oh, of course, it just sorts in place. So we apply the sorting and then we assert that our new sorted array equals to expected value. Let's test it out. And of course, we need semicolon here. This is Java. And test passed. So what edge cases can be here? You obviously need to test sort empty array, right? Just to make sure you didn't get index out of bound exceptions somewhere. So let's say empty array should give you an empty array as a result, right? Also, you can try to test one element array. Say 1, and you'll be expected 1 as well. Oops, not debug. I need to run. And test passed. Great. So the last step is complexity. So as I mentioned, complexity is very crucial part of your solution because you can solve the algorithm, but it might be not the optimal solution. In this case, we used only one for loop, even though we have multiple for loops here, they're not nested. So we just have big annotation from n here. We wouldn't explain today what does it mean because of the lack of time, but you can read about big annotation a little bit later. So this is just one example, right? But what's crucial here is the approach. You need to go through those 7 steps. You need to read the problem itself very carefully. And you need to try to brainstorm different paths from different sides. That's really important. If you want to learn a little bit more about different approaches and different algorithms, we launch completely free course every Sunday starting this Sunday. We offer completely free online course to help to prepare for coding interviews. We'll try to show you 1-2 problems every week. Again, this is completely free. we'll share the link in the channel, but you can simply find it with, if you go to our website, ingenious.io, you can find the Ingenious University link here. We have multiple programs, but the coding interview preparation is one I'm talking about. So the apply now will link you to a Zoom meeting where you can register for a webinar, same as we showed today. Thanks for attention.
Awesome, great. I think that is really awesome that you are gonna do this free sessions for preparing a coding interview. I think it's very important. So guys, do we have a questions here? You can post it in the Slack. You can post it in the chat. Meanwhile, let's do, we never done this before. So it's gonna be something new. We call it online networking session. Let's have fun. So, and you know, let me stop the videos recording. Let me stop the video recording here.